Well, tomorrow marks 26 years since the democratic constitution came into effect. That was way back on the 4th of February 1997. The constitution sets the rights and values for the people of the country. To discuss the significance of this milestone and the performance of the constitution 26 years later, I'm joined in studio by Advocate Tseliso Thipanyane, Chairperson of the Southern African Institute for Responsive and Accountable Governance, SIRAG for short, and Valli Moosa. Moosa was one of the architects of the Constitution. He also served for some time as Minister of Constitutional Development under President Nelson Mandela. He was also a leader, of course, of the mass democratic movement. Currently, he is also the chairperson of the Constitution Hill TrustChair. Advocate and Mr. Moosa, I don't know if it's Dr. Moosa. I'm just double checking because now and again we find out that people are honored with doctorates, and out of respect we have to recognize that. Welcome and thank you very much for your time. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Moosa. As we discuss the significance of the 26th anniversary milestone and you look back at the trajectory traveled so far by our constitution, in your view, how has it performed?
Thank you very much, Dan, and good afternoon to the advocate and to the listeners. It's very interesting the manner in which you phrased the question, because on the 4th of February 1996, the new constitution came into operation. And this was the constitution, which is actually a constitution. It's not a statute. It's not a piece of law. It is a document that spells out what we as the South African nation see ourselves as. It's a reflection of how we see ourselves and a reflection of the vision we have for our future and for the future of generations to come. That's what it is. So as much as it is a legal document, it is also a political statement and a manifesto of the nation at the same time. And in that sense, I would say that the Constitution, I'm constantly amazed at the manner in which the Constitution has captured the aspirations and the desires of the people of South Africa. Of course, it did the basic things. The most important thing it said is, henceforth, power belongs to the people. And all the power is going to be put into the hands of the people. There shall be regular elections every 5 years without fail. Those elections shall be conducted in a free and fair manner, and the people will be free to choose whoever they want to govern the land. And that's the biggest freedom at the end of the day that the Constitution had given to all of us, and which the people had given to themselves, but codified it into the Constitution as such. And since 1996, we've had a number of general elections and we've had a number of municipal elections. In all of those elections, we've had a relatively high voter turnout compared to most countries in the world. In other words, people are using the power they have to participate in the democracy. The elections have been conducted in a free and fair manner, unlike what you find in some countries where after the elections, people take to the streets and the losing candidates, become violent and those sorts of things. The outcome of the elections were always accepted by everybody. In other words, people have accepted that they were free and fair. And that is a huge milestone that we have. It's another question, of course, as to whether you agree with the choice that people make of the party they choose. Some people say, oh, well, it's good that they chose the party they did. And others say they should have chosen somebody else. But that's a separate matter altogether. The most important thing is that people have the right to free choice. And part of that free choice entrenched in the Constitution is freedom of expression and freedom of the press, something which we didn't enjoy under apartheid. Now you can say whatever you want to. You will find, Pradhan, as you know, if you go on to radio talk shows, people are insulting the president of the country left, right, and center. None of those people go to jail for that purpose. It's not illegal to do so. There is freedom of expression. So you cannot exercise your political choices without freedom of expression. I can go on to a number of other elements of the Constitution.
We'll touch on some. Valli, we'll touch on the other elements as we discuss. I want to bring in Tseliso Thipanyane, Advocate Tseliso Thipanyane, who in this not so long ago was the CEO of the Human Rights Commission. And one of the things that is mentioned about our Constitution each time you hear about it, and it's compared to other countries, Advocate, is that it contains the Bill of Rights in it. And how has it done in making sure that there's an advancement of human rights in our country over the last 26 years? Let me point out, we're saying 26 years from the day it became effective. But as Valli Moosa was pointing out, it was approved on the 4th of February, a year earlier, in 1996.
Yes. I see the Constitution as a social contract between us as South Africans as to see how we should be governed. And therefore, human rights is quite fundamental. It's actually the founding values of our society. And therefore, if you look over the past 26 years, one could say there's been a mixed bag. I mean, as Valli said, we've had regional elections, and I think people are looking forward to next year, where again the will of the people will be determined, how we govern ourselves and who governs us. But on other aspects, there are major challenges. So let's take the issues of social justice, a better life for South Africans. 26 years later, we have high levels of poverty, unemployment, we have Eskom as a major challenge, and we still have the divisions of the past in our country. So whilst we have done well in many aspects, there are also worrying cracks in the house. The paint is also peeling off, and we need to fix these issues. Otherwise, we are heading for troubles ahead if we don't address this. So it has been a mixed bag. Some people actually have enjoyed the benefits of South Africa, but for the majority of South Africans who are living in poverty, unemployment, without food, it's definitely a bit of a concern.
Yeah, and one of the issues, Valli, I don't know what you think about that, is a land issue, for example, but also the issue of gender equality has been raised now and again, even recently at the governing party's national conference in December, and people were pointing out to the lack of women in the top leadership in the past, but now they've got 3 women in the top 7, as they say. For you, what would be the key challenges where the Constitution should really be enforced more?
Yeah, I think that one of the big things that perhaps we didn't pay enough attention to was to raise awareness amongst the general population about what is written in the Constitution, in the sense of promoting the Constitution and doing basic constitutional education. If you take the question of gender-based violence, by adopting the Constitution doesn't mean that male chauvinism would have been eradicated suddenly. We've got, centuries of male chauvinism. It's so entrenched in the male species that it wasn't. But what the Constitution does is that it makes no bones about the fact that you may not discriminate against anybody on the basis of gender. And it gives women rights that they've never enjoyed before. And in fact, when our Constitution was adopted and came into operation in 1997, it gave the women of South Africa more rights than women enjoyed in just about any other jurisdiction in the world. So what we now need to do is we need to be saying to ourselves, yes, we've got the legal framework to fight gender-based violence, and that's what we should be doing. And I think we're not doing sufficient of that. You raised the question of the land issue. The Constitution makes no bones about the need to redress the imbalances of the past and to reverse the wrongs of apartheid. And one of the big wrongs of apartheid is that land was stolen, holus bolus, from African people in this country. And very little has been done by successive administrations, including, by the way, the administrations which I was part of from 1994 to 2004. Very little has been done in order to redistribute land in this country. It's got nothing to do with the Constitution. The Constitution provides all of the avenues for government to be able to do so. So one of the things I would like to do, and that is why I've now taken on the chairpersonship of the Constitution Hill Trust, is to spend much more time in educating the public and promoting awareness of the Constitution among people, because often people don't actually know the rights which they have. And I think we have a responsibility to be doing so.
Yeah, and besides you in the Constitution Hill Trust, I would think organs like the Human Rights Commission and others, the Department of Justice advocate, should be promoting and through civic education the Constitution.
No, certainly. I mean, one of the founding principles is the will of the people determining government. So we need to get more of our people involved in matters of governance. And that's why, for example, now we're fighting this issue of corruption and abuse of power, as well as the victimization of whistleblowers. Because, we need to get our people more involved to fight corruption. And I think corruption is one of the biggest threats to our democracy. It actually undermines our ability to basically deliver on the Constitution. And therefore, if we get more involved, definitely we could have a better future, and we could actually paint the house and fill the cracks in the house.
Yeah. Valli says that the problem is not the Constitution, for example, when it comes to certain aspects of our lives like land. It's in implementation. Do you think our lawmakers, our executive government people are really committed to the Constitution from what we are seeing? I mean, we've got high levels of poverty, as you've said. Currently, inequality in South Africa has grown and grown in the last 29 years.
They say actions speak louder than words. So even to look at the actions, you want to start actually questioning that level of commitment. We can't, 26 years later, have these high levels of poverty. Look at the land issue, which Valli is saying. Many black South Africans don't have land, and land was taken from black people through force.
Yeah. Valli, how do we actually turn the Constitution to become our true north as a country going forward? Because from what you've said and what Advocate Thipanyane is saying here, there's nothing wrong currently with our Constitution as it stands, but it's in how its aspects are being implemented or not being implemented. So how do we make it to become that true north?
Yeah, Braden, in many ways, in a society which is as fractured, as divided, and riddled with the problems that we have, our Constitution actually does already provide stability. There have been many calls for the Constitution should be changed, to be amended since it was adopted. And this has proved to be an extremely resilient Constitution. And one of the reasons why nobody has been able to change it is because of the correctness of the Constitution itself. And because, by the way, the people of this country know that the Constitution needs to be valued. So it is the one thing that has not changed. Many things have been changed, presidents have been recalled, others, this has happened, that has happened, but the Constitution has remained the one stable thing in our society. And it's the one important element of the culture and the history of South Africa that is recognized and respected by everybody. We need to build on that. And we need to enable society and civil society to be able to use the Constitution to challenge the authorities or anybody else when they are not fulfilling the visions of the Constitution. One of the central features of our Constitution is human dignity, because apartheid robbed us of our dignity. And the Constitution, it runs as a central theme right through. The restoration of human dignity. And often you would find the dignity of South Africans being trampled upon in this way or that way. And it's the Constitution, we must use the Constitution in order to assert the dignity of fellow South Africans.
Yeah. Could ordinary South Africans use the Constitution as a tool to hold government to account?
No, certainly. As Valli says, dignity is very important. And there's no dignity in poverty, hunger, unemployment.
There's no dignity in corruption?
In corruption. So, yes, we must use the Constitution a lot more as South Africans to hold government to account, to give effect to the preamble provisions in our Constitution.
Yeah. Now, if you're going to enable people to understand that they can use the Constitution in this way, besides civic education, besides awareness, how else can we make sure that it becomes a reality? Because currently, Constitution is like in a book. I see you've got the booklet there, the famous Constitution booklet. Just pass it on to me, Advocate Thipanyane, so I can show our viewers what I'm talking about. This is the Constitution, the famous Constitution. This booklet that has been there. It has been shown quite a lot, and many people have it. You brought it in, but how can we ensure that it becomes a living document amongst South Africans so that they can have that dignity that Valli is talking about?
Well, it's really about the involvement of us as citizens, business, politicians, and everybody else, because this is the future of our country. It's a social contract which we've entered into, and we need to make it alive. And therefore, roles played by organizations like us, civil society, media, needs to be much more amplified to make sure that this vision is actually realized, and we have less poverty in our country, less crime, less divisions, and more land for our people.
Okay. Before we're going to end our conversation, Valli, I want to challenge you on the fact that you said earlier, and I stated that as well, that there's nothing really wrong with our Constitution, as you said, but there have been people calling for changes. When you look back as one of the architects of our Constitution, do you think there could be some tweaks that are needed today, understanding the environment we live in, the new world we live in, for example, or do you think it should just be left alone?
Look, we must be very clear that the Constitution was drafted by South Africans, by human beings. It is not the gospel. And therefore, there is nothing wrong with people suggesting from time to time that our Constitution should be amended in this way or that way. We should not rob our citizens of the right they have to call for the amendment of the Constitution, and then to amend the Constitution, if they so wish, using the procedures that are spelled out in the Constitution to do so. So I see nothing wrong with that kind of debate. In fact, it is a debate which we must have. It will be a shame if we turn our Constitution in something as cast in stone like the Ten Commandments. You may not question it, you may not debate it. Unless we debate it constantly, it won't be the living document you want it to be. So in all those debates, nobody has said, throw out the Constitution, overthrow the Constitution, overthrow the democratic system. Nobody has said that. People have called for the amendment to the Constitution, and that, frankly, is the way it should be done. You may not like the amendments they want to make, but they have the right to argue for it, campaign for it, and if they convince society that it should be changed, then it could be changed. So we are very fortunate. In many other new democratic countries that have not had experience of democracy like us, very quickly you find that the Constitution actually gets overthrown. And that has not been a danger that we faced at all, and we should value that and be very happy about it.
Yeah, and your thoughts on that, Advocate Thipanyane?
Well, for me, we need to get our people being able to hold those in power much more accountable, and that's why we're supporting reforms in our electoral system.
But not reforms in the Constitution, not changes in the Constitution.
Well, if that is necessary, it should happen, because honestly, without greater accountability of those in power by our people, we'll have many of these problems. So I support the electoral reform to allow greater accountability of politicians and those in power by our people.
That's why you're looking forward to 2024, as you said earlier.
Definitely.
Thank you very much. That's Advocate Tseliso Thipanyane, Chairperson of the Southern African Institute for Responsive and Accountable Governance, SIRAC, and Valli Moosa, Chairperson of the Constitution Hill TrustChair, one of the architects of our Constitution. We're just looking at this significance milestone because it's 26 years ago, on the 4th of February, 1997, that our Constitution, in fact, came into effect, though it was approved a year earlier, on the 4th of February 1996, by the Constitutional Court.